What if I told you? There was once a boy so lazy he wouldn't even stand up to do his chores, and yet he ended up outsmarting the strongest people in the kingdom, and walked away with a prize no one expected him to win. Sounds impossible, right? But this isn't just a story about laziness. It's about how a clever mind, a powerful reason, and a little desperation can flip the script completely. His name was Ryan, and while the world laughed at him, he quietly found a way to prove them all wrong. Not with strength, not with speed, but with something far more powerful. By the end of this story, you'll see how even the laziest person, yes, even you, can shock everyone if you just learn to think a little differently. Let's begin. In a quiet little village, surrounded by dusty roads and endless rice fields, lived a boy named Ryan. From the outside, he looked like any other teenager: messy hair, sun-kissed skin, and a relaxed way of moving that made you think, this guy probably doesn't worry about much. And you'd be right. Ryan had one problem: he hated working. Not in a rebellious, dramatic way. Just didn't see the point of moving when you could get things done lying down every morning. While the village boys were out swinging sticks or helping with the harvest, Ryan had a special job. He was supposed to chase birds away from his father's rice fields. Now, most kids would run up and down with slingshots or shout to scare the birds off. Not Ryan. Instead, he tied wooden poles across the field and strung ropes between them like some kind of spider web. Then he'd lie down in the shade, tug on a rope or two, and the birds would fly off, thinking someone was there. It was genius. Lazy, but genius. His father noticed, of course. He'd sigh sometimes, shaking his head if I ever fall sick. He once muttered, "How will Ryan take care of things?" But deep down, he couldn't be mad. Ryan always got the job done, just on his own weird, low-effort terms. What no one realized was that laziness was hiding something that one day the entire kingdom would see. For a while, life continued just like that. Ryan lounged under the sun, tugged on ropes, and avoided hard work like it was some kind of disease. But life has a way of testing those who try to avoid it. One summer, everything changed. It hadn't rained in weeks. The rice fields were dry, the soil cracked, and the crops looked thirsty. Then, one morning, Ryan's father didn't get out of bed. His forehead burned with fever, and his breathing was shallow. Just like that, the quiet man who had always handled everything was too weak to move. Suddenly, the entire responsibility fell on Ryan's shoulders. At first, he tried to pretend everything was fine. He watered the field barely, tried to chase the birds half-heartedly, but the truth was painful. He had no idea how to run a farm. And worse, he had never prepared himself to care. Days passed. The crops began to wither. What had once been a green sea of rice was now turning yellow and dry. Ryan stood in the middle of the field, sweat running down his face, watching everything fall apart around him. That night, he sat under the stars, staring at the dark sky. For the first time, there was no rope to pull. No clever trick to use, just silence and guilt. "Why didn't I try harder?" he whispered. "Why did I waste all that time?" He wasn't just lazy anymore. He was afraid that he'd let his family down, that maybe he'd never been as smart as he thought. But just when Ryan was about to give up completely, he heard a noise from the village square, a voice calling out. A crowd gathering. Something was happening, and Ryan had no idea that his entire future was about to change. The next morning, the village buzzed with excitement. A royal soldier stood in the main square, shouting over the crowd. His armor shimmered in the sunlight, and his voice carried across the rooftops. "A competition will be held at the king's palace," he announced. "All citizens are welcome. The winner will receive a chest of gold, honor from the king himself, and a reward for their family." A hush fell over the villagers. Gold from the palace? For most people, it was a fairy tale, but for Ryan, it was something else. It was hope. He didn't wait. He didn't ask anyone's permission. He just stepped forward and said, "I'll go." People turned and stared. "You, Ryan? The lazy one? This has to be a joke." They laughed. Some whispered cruel things under their breath. Others shook their heads, already imagining him giving up halfway, but Ryan didn't care. He wasn't thinking about their voices. He was thinking about his father, weak in bed. He was thinking about the dried-up crops. He was thinking about his mother's eyes, how they looked tired lately, like she was losing hope too. He didn't have a sword. He didn't have muscles. But he had 3 days to get to the palace, so he packed a small bag, told his parents he would try, and walked out of the village alone. His parents didn't stop him. They didn't expect him to win. But in their hearts, they prayed that maybe, just maybe, this journey would wake something up inside him. And they were right. Because Ryan wasn't just heading toward the palace. He was heading toward the biggest transformation of his life. After 3 long days of walking, Ryan finally reached the palace gates. He stood among dozens of competitors, strong men with broad shoulders, quick-footed boys with confident eyes, and warriors who looked like they trained for this kind of thing every day. Ryan just looked tired. He listened carefully as the rules were announced. "The first challenge is simple," said the royal officer. "Cross the lake. The first 3 to reach the other side will qualify for the next round." The long, wide lake shimmered in the morning sun. The water was deep, and the far shore looked miles away. Ryan's stomach twisted. He wasn't a swimmer. He wasn't strong. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd touched water deeper than his knees. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1, go. The crowd roared as contestants dove into the lake. Water splashed everywhere, dozens of bodies slicing through the surface, like arrows. But Ryan didn't move. He stood there, watching them swim farther and farther away. "If I jump in now, I'll drown," he thought. "There has to be another way." That's when it hit him. He turned and sprinted into the nearby forest. Everyone thought he was giving up, but Ryan's mind was racing. He grabbed branches, vines, and broken bamboo sticks. In just minutes, he had built something strange and clunky, a makeshift raft. Then he found a flat piece of wood and used it as a paddle. While others struggled to stay afloat, Ryan pushed off from the shore. The raft wobbled. It was slow, but it floated. "This isn't a swimming contest," he reminded himself. "It's a race to the other side." No one said how we had to cross. The sun rose higher. Swimmers began to slow down. Some were panting. Others clung to floating markers. But Ryan, he was paddling, steady, focused, quiet. And before anyone realized what was happening, he passed one swimmer, then another, then 5 more. By the time he reached the far bank, only 2 people had arrived before him. Ryan was third. He had made it not by force, not by speed, but by doing what no one else had thought of. The crowd murmured. The judges stared. Ryan simply stepped off his raft, smiled, and walked forward. The boy everyone laughed at had just qualified for the final round. The next morning, the palace grounds were quiet, too quiet. Only 3 contestants remained. 2 of them were exactly what you'd expect: tall, muscular, serious-looking men who had dominated the first challenge with raw strength. And then there was Ryan, still thin, still calm. But now, people weren't laughing. They were watching. The final challenge was revealed. Each contestant would receive a massive wooden block, solid, heavy, nearly the size of a dining table. The task? Push that block exactly 1 kilometer, all the way to the palace gate. But there was a twist. Behind them lay a table full of tools, ropes, levers, wheels, pulleys, and more. Each person could choose only one. The moment the signal was given, the first man rushed to grab a thick rope and wrapped it around his shoulders, muscles bulging. He began dragging the block inch by inch. The second man selected a lever-thick wooden beam and jammed it under his block, trying to roll it forward with brute force. Ryan didn't move. He stood still, staring at the tools, thinking, "I'm not the strongest, I'm not the fastest, but I can think." Then, slowly, he walked forward and picked up something that made the entire crowd gasp. A small knife. Whispers broke out. "What's he going to do with that? Carve a path? This is suicide." But Ryan didn't flinch. He knelt beside the massive wooden block and began carving, slow, steady strokes. One side, then another. The other contestants kept dragging and pushing, sweating and struggling. But Ryan was shaping. After nearly an hour, his block was no longer a block. It was round. He had turned it into a giant wooden ball, and then with a deep breath and a strong push, Ryan rolled it forward. It moved fast. He ran beside it, guiding it with both hands, dust flying under his feet. One by one, he passed the others, still stuck, still dragging their blocks like anchors. The crowd rose to their feet. Even the guards looked stunned, and before anyone could fully understand what had happened, Ryan crossed the finish line. First, he didn't just win, he outhawed everyone. Silence. For a moment, no one clapped, no one moved. They just stared at the boy who had carved a block into a wheel and outrun the kingdom's strongest men. Then cheers erupted. Loud. Thundering applause shook the palace walls as Ryan stood breathless at the finish line, his hands resting on the giant wooden ball. Even the king, seated high above on his golden throne, leaned forward in surprise. This wasn't the ending anyone expected. Not from him. Servants rushed forward with a chest of gold. Ryan blinked, almost unsure whether this was real, but it was. He hadn't just won a competition. He'd won respect. The kind that can't be bought, only earned. The royal officer approached him with a scroll, bowing slightly. "You've shown us something rare," he said. "Not strength, not speed, but true wisdom under pressure. The king invites you to stay in the palace, continue your learning." Ryan looked up, overwhelmed, but all he could think of was home. He shook his head gently. "I need to go back," he said softly. "My family needs me." And that's exactly what he did. He returned to his village not as the lazy boy who pulled ropes in the rice field, but as the boy who had once been underestimated by everyone and still came out on top. His father, still recovering, cried when he saw him. His mother held him for minutes without saying a word. And the villagers, the same ones who had laughed when he left, they stood quietly as he passed by, eyes filled with something new. Respect. Ryan used the gold to save their farm. He worked harder than ever, not because he had to, but because now he wanted to. Not to prove anything, not to silence the doubters, but because he had found his reason, and that reason changed everything.